geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and kittens, comic book fans all around the world. Yes, I am back. I am back. A week and a half late, but I'm back with another episode of Ask Chuck Dixon. Sorry for the absence, but I have a good reason. I have a note from my mom. Anyway, it's another episode of Ask Chuck Dixon where you get to ask me, an accomplished comic book writer of many years, world famous, stopped on the street and asked for my autograph and selfies all the time. And if you believe that, you'll believe anything I tell you. Anyway, you get to ask me about what I do for a living. What I do for a living is I write comic books. So there you go. Now, why didn't I do a show this week, and why did it take so long this week? My apologies. Last week I was a couple of days at CGC down in Sarasota and signing copies of The Horseman #1. So, these are going to be slabbed and graded and all that good stuff. So if you ordered them through Rippaverse, they're on the way. I signed a bunch of them, a whole bunch of Horsemen, just for you. Maybe I signed yours. In addition to that, further delays were caused when I bought a new computer, and you know how that is. You take the old one out, you switch over to the new one, and then everything's changed, and nothing's where it should be. And oh my gosh, I should have transferred this, and I needed to download that, and I need to update this, and my printer's not working quite right, and I can't find the scanner downloads, and blah, 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 blah. So, I'm still recovering from that. And of course, it made it near impossible to create one of these videos because everything had changed with the new computer. It's like waking up in a strange house. You don't know where the bathroom is, you don't know where the kitchen is, you don't know what floor you're on. So there you go. But I'm back in action, and we'll continue on. And here's the first question. Mr. Entertainment wants to know, name your favorite 70s Charles Bronson movies from this list. I have to use your list? The list is Chado's Land, The Mechanic, The Stone Killer, Death Wish, Mr. Majestic, Hard Times. Okay. Number one, Chado's Land. I vividly remember seeing all of these, the ones you listed, and at our local grindhouse, the Eric Terminal, the infamous Eric Terminal. I remember seeing Chado's Land. I might have seen it on a double bill with Hang 'em High. I'm not sure. Anyway, I love this movie. It's Bronson as an Apache Indian. Bronson's one of those guys. He's like Vin Diesel, Anthony Quinn. It's like they're acceptable as almost anything. Because Bronson looked the way he looked, it was like, yeah, he was okay as an Apache Indian. I believe that. Maybe half Mexican, even though he was Polish. He could pull it off. And he doesn't have a lot of lines in this movie and everything else, but it's a really intense Western, if you've never seen it. Basically a bunch of guys, push Bronson around. Never a good idea. He kills one or two of them. I can't remember which. I got to rewatch this one. I rewatch this one pretty frequently. And he's an Apache Indian, and he knows he's in trouble with the white man for killing two white men. So he vanishes into the desert, and they send a posse out to kill him. And it's Richard Basehart and Jack Palance and a bunch of other Western character actors, and they pursue Chado into Chado's Land. And the slugline for the movie was, what Chado's land doesn't kill, Chado will. And basically, they're too late to realize that Chado is not running from them. He is leading them into the terrain that he knows best. So he can lay one ambush after another, and take them down Apache style. Really good 70s mean Western. I love a 70s mean Western. Next on my list would be Mr. Majestic, screenplay by Elmore Leonard. Simple I love a simple story, well told. And this is just, Bronson is a melon grower out in California, and he hires a lot of, well, they didn't call them illegal immigrants at the time. They were just migrant workers. Anyway, he's growing melons, and all he cares is, stay away from my melons. That's his only interest is in getting the crop in. But he runs into trouble, and he basically runs into trouble with the law. Ends up in the same jail cell and escaping with this mafia guy. And then it's all just car chases and shootouts and tough guy stuff all throughout. It's just again, I saw this at the Eric Terminal. It's just a great grindhouse kind of action film, and I like it. Some fun dialogue, and Bronson in peak form. The Mechanic, terrific. He's a killer for hire. He'll find 600 different ways to kill you, well, this says he has 100 ways. But it's Bronson. You never know how many ways Bronson has to kill you. And he's basically, Jan Michael Vincent is his apprentice. He's teaching Jan Michael Vincent the ropes of the killing for hire business, and that leads to trouble. So those would be my 3 off your list. Now I will add one that wasn't on your list: Breakout. Breakout is a movie that was basically one of those rip scream from the headlines movies, because in reality, in real life, a guy escaped from a Mexican prison. This wealthy, gringo or gabacho escaped from, I don't know what the difference between the two is. He escapes from this Mexican prison by, paying for a helicopter to drop down the prison yard and carry him away. And this is kind of a loose, not really wedded to the truth retelling of that, with Bronson as a dude who, he owns an airplane. He doesn't know how to fly a helicopter. But he's willing to try. He's willing to learn, and he runs this little aviation company out in some, border area in the desert. And his business partner is Randy Quaid. And if it sounds funny, it is, because Bronson plays this one not for comedy but for humor. So we get to see Bronson's humor chops, and he could be a very funny guy, and. It's a fun movie. The only downside of this movie is Robert Duvall. Robert Duvall, amazing actor, usually gives a fantastic performance. I don't think he wanted to be in this movie. He's sort of over the top in his roles. He doesn't seem to be in the same movie everyone else is in, and unusual for Duvall. I mean, maybe I should blame the director, or maybe Duvall just didn't want to be in it. But he didn't phone it in. He just sort of went over the top. Overreacting to things, or maybe they just chose the wrong takes. You never know with these things. Maybe the director was angry at Robert Duvall and says, "We're going to use all his bad takes." So I'm not going to blame Duvall, because he's batting 900 in the acting department. I mean, Robert Duvall, you're assured of an excellent performance, and usually a very restrained performance, which is what made this movie so unusual. So there you go. Those are my big Bronson. And then there's others as the years go on. I really like Breakheart Pass a whole lot. So, and From Noon Till 3, another good one. And I saw all the ones that are on your list. It's funny because Death Wish, everybody thinks of Death Wish. I saw Death Wish twice, and I don't really ever want to see it again. It was a little too brutal for me. Not him killing people, but the inciting incident, if you know what I mean. The thing that pisses him off. I thought that scene was way out of line. We didn't need to see that much detail. Anyway, that's just me. Yvonne McGila. I've always thought that Alan Grant lived in the U.S. at the time he wrote Batman. I know he was Scottish, but even so, in my head, he should have moved there to work at D.C. But recently, probably here at Ask Chuck Dixon, I hear that he never left Britain. So I know your job was not related directly to his, except on Bat Summits, I believe. But how was your relations with him? I'm asking more personal, considering he's living there. Hey, Alan, can you bring me some 2000 AD issues this next Bat Summit or so? Now, I never asked Alan to bring me any 2000 ADs. He might have if I asked. Nice guy, super nice guy. But he lived in I don't know exactly where. I think he actually lived in Scotland. And for a long time, what he told us was he bought a desanctified church, and it was almost 1,000 years old. And he bought it, he was living in it. And his office was up in the choir loft. And, he lived, because I remember talking to him, and I had just bought a farm, part of a farm, 5 acres, and we put a house on it, but it had a barn on it that had been built in 1790. It was a stone barn. And I was telling him about it, and I remember him saying, there's nothing really old in America. He didn't consider 1790 old. So he owned this, this desanctified medieval church, and he owned the cemetery, the graveyard around it, and he would go out there with metal detector and find all kinds of stuff. And he was always hoping that he would find the Viking hoard, the place where they hid their wealth when the Vikings or whoever showed up. At this point, the Normans, the Angles, whoever, 900 years old, and this is in the 1990s, 900 years old. Everybody was invading at that time. So he never found it, as far as I know, or maybe he did and he kept it to himself. Because when you find stuff like that, you don't broadcast it. But he found a lot of really cool stuff. Spear points and horseshoes and goblets and stuff like that. But super cool guy. But no, he didn't. He never lived in the United States, and he didn't have to live at D.C. I mean, back in the 90s, it was FedEx, and eventually you were emailing your scripts in, so you didn't have to live in the U.S. But I will say this: every time Alan came to a Bat Summit, and when we would have these things once a year or maybe once every 9 months, when he came, he would bring his wife along, and they would make a vacation of it. And he would come here and he would spend like a month or more, a month or 6 weeks in the United States. And what he and his wife would do was they would rent a car and just head off into the hinterlands. And I think it's safe to say that Alan Grant saw more of the United States than I ever saw. He loved the United States. He really did. And he liked traveling around and meeting people. And, he would, travel the back roads, go to the little towns, go to the odd little out-of-the-way places and stay, in inns and, single-owner motels. And, he really wanted to get a feel for America. And I envy him for that. But he did it every single time. And I always remember the other thing he did that I thought was such a great idea and such a man thing to do is when he packed his clothes, he would never pack underwear or socks. He would just buy them here. And, and when it was time to go back to Scotland, he would just throw them away. And I thought, man, that's cool. Because he thought, why would I pack socks and underwear that I can buy anywhere? So, so now you know about Alan Grant's underwear, his guilty secret. But yeah, I never asked him any favors like that. But awesome guy, absolutely awesome guy. Okay, Greg Deedle. I've been liking the Medal of Honor stories you've been writing for AUSA, especially the collaboration with Wayne Van Zant, one of my favorite war comic artists. Do you know if these stories will be collected into a print version? If they have, where are they available? Anyway, I hope the series continues. More people need to know what these brave men and women did, and I could not agree with you more. The Medal of Honor series, it's just an honor to write these, to get to do the research. Joseph Craig of AUSA, he gathers, almost all the research material for me to pick through, and then I write the script. He makes his own corrections, and then it's handed over to actual historians who look over it to make sure I haven't, completely made stuff up. And of all the things I've ever written, these take the longest. I can usually do 8 pages of comics a day. With these, it's 4 pages a day. I can't do any more because of all the intense research. And I like to find the artist all the images. If I ask for something, if I ask for a BAR, if I ask for a Springfield rifle, if I'm mentioning certain kinds of fortifications, I want to find visual reference. I don't want that all to be on the artist. And then Joseph finds more of it. So it has been an honor to work on these, and I say that in past tense because I'm not going to be writing these anymore. I've done, oh my gosh, I don't even know how many I've done. I've done a lot of these. And generally, I would do 4 a year, and then there were 2 specials. I did a Birth of America one and a special story just about Pont de Hoc, the incredible assault at Omaha Beach on D-Day. But I won't be doing any more of these. Joseph is going to. I think at this point Joseph could write them himself. I think I've by this time taught him how to write comics, and I hope he does it. I hope he doesn't hand it over to somebody else because he is a terrific editor. And anyway, so I won't be doing any more of these. Now, as far as it being collected, they are collected. Each year, the 4 episodes are collected into a cardstock comic book, and this is given away at AUSA's convention every year. So if you attend the AUSA convention, you get a copy of that year's Medal of Honor winners, which was 32 pages. So I have been asking Joseph over and over and over again. I said, you must collect all of these. I mean, they would make a terrific trade paperback at this point. You have to collect all of these for retail and let more and more people read these stories. And these stories are incredible. You can read them all for free online. They just aren't in print for you, the consumer. They're just done as giveaways. But I'm urging him over and over again, make these available for retail because these are really good stories, and they really are. I mean, these guys, like Flo Groberg, Afghanistan, Army, total stud. He signed a copy of the one I wrote for him and wrote a really nice thank you note. And I've gotten thank you notes from some of the families of some of these guys who were awarded posthumously. I mean, just, it's humbling. It's because these guys are freaking amazing. And woman, and the one woman we have, the Civil War nurse that we include in the series. But just absolutely jaw-dropping what these guys could do. They're true superheroes. You hold your manhood cheap when you read these stories and read all the details. And I still think constantly of Roy Benavidez. Roy Benavidez was with First Cav in Vietnam, and he volunteered to go help rescue a long-range patrol that was surrounded by NVA and Viet Cong. And he volunteered, even though he had not fully recovered from really horrific wounds he had gotten the months before. Volunteered, and he got a whole bunch more horrific wounds. I mean, in this one day, rescuing guys, just basically dragging them to the helicopters. He got stabbed, blown up, shot. I mean, he was shot like 9 times, shrapnel, bayonet wounds, a concussion from being hit over the head by a Viet Cong with a rifle butt. And this guy kept going and going and going. He dragged so many guys to a helicopter from medevac that without even knowing it, he dragged 3 wounded VC to the helicopters. He says anybody he saw wounded, he dragged. And this guy lived through this, and he lived, quite a long time given the extraordinary number of wounds he got. And if you ever look up Roy Benavidez, he would go on speaking tours and talk about what he had done to the public and to other soldiers. And there's videos on YouTube, and you really need to see this guy tell his story. Just amazing stuff. So anyway, yeah, I could talk all day about the Medal of Honor series. Sadly, I won't be doing any more of them, but I did a whole bunch, and I got to do the 2 that I really wanted to do, which was Audie Murphy and Tom Custer. So there you go. And I will continue. I'm in continuing communication with Joseph, and I will continue to pester him to get these published in retail, even if I have to arrange with a publisher. I know a few guys who would publish these in a heartbeat. Mr. Entertainment, again, you should get a twin spin, but as I said, I got a new computer, and I'm not really up to speed on the twin spins, but you get one. You get one. In our minds, you got a fabulous twin spin. Anyway, Mr. Entertainment says, were you big into the Walking Dead comics or TV show, or was it too grim for your taste? Yeah, I think I read half the comics, and I watched the TV show until it got stupid. I basically watched the TV show until the season after Negan, the character Negan, was introduced. And the show made no sense to me after that. And then I kept watching, hoping it would improve. It didn't. And then it got really boring. It's like they forgot that this is like a zombie apocalypse thriller story, and they seem to think it was some sort of group therapy session each week, as each character would talk about their traumatic experiences of the first few seasons. And it's like, yeah, I know, we were there with you, we saw all that stuff, and they would all, you know, pair off with another character to basically talk about their trauma, and it was scene after scene after scene of them just yapping in the woods or yapping in the chapel or, you know, whatever. And I made it halfway through a season and never went back. I said, you know, this is like work watching this show. I've never seen a show come off the rails like this one did. I don't know if everybody else feels that way, but I mean, they had lightning in a bottle the first few seasons, and they just sort of let it all go to hell. I mean, I understand there's like a spinning moral compass on the show, and a lot of great stories have that, the things they had to do to survive and everything else, and I was all, you know, into that aspect of it, but then they just sort of lost it. They sort of lost it. Why would you let this Negan guy, why would you think he was redeemable? Why would you allow him to continue living? You've killed other people for less. You know, and did they expect the viewers to forgive this character for what he had done? I don't get it. I really don't get it. The show needed Jesus, is what it needed. Kieran Brunkard, what are your favorite superhero movies and TV series? Do you like animation? Let me answer the second one first. Yeah, I like animation. I grew up on cartoons, and you know, I don't watch a lot of anime. I mean, recently I watched The Wind Rises, you know, Ghibli Studios production about the guy who basically invented the Japanese Zero, and I really enjoyed that and everything else. But before you say, hey, Chuck, you and your highfalutin art house animation, what about real cartoons? Yeah, I love real cartoons. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I went on a Foghorn Leghorn binge. I watched a whole bunch of Foghorn Leghorn. And, you know, occasionally I'll jump in and watch a bunch of, you know, Donald Ducks or Tom and Jerry's. Droopy. Droopy's a favorite. I can sit down and watch 2 hours of Tex Avery. Absolutely no problem. And, but I think recently the last animated series I watched with any kind of regularity was The Venture Brothers. I really like that. I usually was not into that Adult Swim stuff. I didn't watch any of the rest of it, but I really dug The Venture Brothers. And I watched all that. Everybody keeps telling me about Primal, and I do have the first 2 seasons of Primal on Blu-ray. I just got to get around to watching it. So, but yeah, I like cartoons. Now, Marvel, superhero movies, not just Marvel movies. My top 3, Iron Man, the first Iron Man movie. It's just a hell of a movie because it follows the source material, but it builds upon the source material, but it never gets far from the source material, and to me that is the key. The other thing I think that makes Iron Man a success is they didn't have an enormous budget for it. I mean, they were cutting stuff out of the screenplay. We can't afford this, we can't afford that, and making compromises, and they were all creative compromises. I think it made it a better movie. I think too many times these movies, they're like the government. It's like we got all the money in the world to spend, and so you're not coming up with creative solutions. You're just throwing stuff out there because you can, not thinking, should we do this? Just because we can. No, you shouldn't. And the writing is the same thing. Should we make a joke here? We could make a joke here. No, please restrain yourself with your hokey jokey jokes. I want a somewhat serious superhero movie. Yeah, you can have humor, but not outright comedy, which I'm seeing more and more of in these things. The next one, Spider-Man 2, my favorite of all the Spider-Man movies. This one is so much like the Lee Ditko comics, so much like it. So many great scenes basically recreated, and Alfred Molina is just perfection as Dr. Octopus. You think about it, Dr. Octopus, completely ludicrous character, but Molina sells you on this character. You completely believe it. And just a really terrific movie, and it has all of the angst and all of the things that made Spider-Man great in those first few years of the comic strip. And like I said, perfectly recreating so many of the classic scenes. Sam Raimi was very much enamored of the source material here. Now, another superhero movie, this may be coming out of left field, but I really like Kick-Ass. I don't know how accurate it is to the comic, because I never read the comic. I imagine, knowing Mark Millar's work, that it's pretty damn accurate. And I just really like it. If I believed in guilty pleasures, this would be a guilty pleasure. But this movie's so much, goofy fun, and stylistically so perfect, and it's just a seamless superhero story, even though it's largely parody. But it also works as a superhero story. And who doesn't like Hit Girl? I mean, she's just it's just amazing. This homicidal little girl taking down all these gangsters. And it's violent and bloody, and I love the music. I just love the music. It's just crazy time. Now, as far as superhero TV shows, Greatest American Hero. There's nothing beat this show, because the creators of this show, because they didn't have any source material, they were basically just making a superhero movie, just using the concept of a guy with superpowers and a costume and a cape and all the rest, and then having a lot of fun with it, and doing a lot of what the early Superman writers did, which is like coming up with these imponderables, like, well, what about this and what about that? And I always liked the fact that he never got over his fear of height, that he never knew all of the powers he had. Powers would come and go. He didn't know how to bring them about. I don't think it's any secret that Greatest American Hero is a big influence on Anthony Gonzalez Clark and my Sister Suprema. But yeah, it was a fun series. It was smartly written. It had fun with the superhero genre without demeaning it, without ever saying this is stupid or this is silly. It was very earnest. They took the work seriously, even though there's an awful lot of humor in the show. But they never openly mock Ralph. They never make him look the fool. Bill Maxwell, the Robert Culp character, he was there as the comic relief on the show. But just good stuff. And there's an episode, Operation Spoilsport. They should remake as a feature film. There was like a movie's worth of story in an hour-long TV show, or they should have at least made it a two-parter. It's a great episode. Kieran Brunkert, again, you get a twin spin. I've already explained the technical difficulties here, but it's in the mail. I finished reading the Batman Family Year One box set. I was wondering, how do you redefine and reboot a character, especially an iconic one? What are the rules? Well, I mean, generally, I think the rules are, stay true to the character. As a writer, if you're handed characters, I mean, this isn't just to do year ones, but this is just, if you're handed, if they say, look, you're going to be the new writer on Cats and Potato Salad, starting with issue 19. You need to read issues 1 through 18, and you need to figure out what made that character cool, what made that character interesting, and the weight is even more on you when it's issue 519, because now you've got generations of people who have expectations of this character, and you've got to learn that character, and you've got to discern what is it the readers liked. You can't just go off on your own. You've got to examine what I call the coolness factor. I mean, what made this character click with readers, and how do I maintain that? How do I keep that energy, that interest going, and keep the regular readers happy. And the thing is, I mean, with something like year one, we didn't change anything. Scott Beatty and I stayed absolutely true to Batgirl's earliest years, but we had the real estate to expand, so we just sort of added things. I mentioned before, she first appears as Batgirl at a costume party in her very first appearance in Detective Comics. And in that very same issue, in the backup story, the elongated man goes to a costume party with his wife. And so Scott and I decided, well, let's make it the same costume party. So we did things like that, and that doesn't really alter the character or anything else. It enhances it. And, we have time, she has a little bit more time for introspection and things like that. And then we wedded her to Killer Moth as, he's her bête noir. I don't think that was the case in the original comics, that he was her recurring villain. Maybe it was. I'm not sure. Scott Beatty was the continuity king here. He was the one, saying, yeah, let's do this. He was remembering everything from comics that I had forgotten, from 20 years earlier. And, but the thing is, we didn't change anything. We enhanced it. And that's what the fans like. You want to see your character in the best light. You want that coolness factor maintained and brought out more. And that was our job on the year one books, is to not only explain basically the first year of Barbara Gordon as Batgirl and her evolution toward awesomeness, but to present it as dramatically as possible, in the best light as possible, and come up with some surprises and twists and turns without denigrating a character or changing it forever, or just basically putting our stamp on it because, we've got big egos and we want everybody to remember. Scott and I just want to tell you an awesome story. It already was an awesome story, but we wanted to bring out all the awesomeness, and that was our job, to do that. And like I say, always, we were the invisible hand. We were in the background. Couldn't see us behind the curtain. We wanted you to concentrate on the story, the character, and all the things that you remembered about that character that you really liked. And we were going to bring all of them center stage and remind you of why Batgirl, or Robin, or Nightwing were such great characters. And that's really the job of a comic book writer every month. Not just on the special projects. The way you don't want to do it is just throw everything out, tell the readers go to hell, tell the fans your opinions don't matter, and we're just going to do what we want to do because this is good for you. And if you don't like it, you're stupid. That's not a winning strategy. As the people who do that are beginning painfully to realize. Even again, you get a double spin too, a twin spin. I'm Brazilian, but I often have meetings with my American co-workers, colleagues, most of them from Minnesota. Some time ago, I used this line, "see you down the road," as a goodbye in some meetings, but I got a very unexpected result. They found it very weird. Some kind of laughed, but another friend came to the point that he actually corrected me, like, don't say that. Say, see you later, or see you next week. So is "I'll see you down the road" a Philly expression or a Floridian expression? Or did I probably miss the timing or exact meaning of this expression? Or is it maybe awkward just for Minnesotans? Yeah, see you down the road. I don't know where see you down the road comes from. I mean, it's just an Americanism. And, I don't see the problem with it, It's like if you said "see you later, alligator," would they be thinking that you were wishing they would be consumed by alligators? I mean, in a wild crocodile, could you use that and not terrify them? I don't think this has anything at all to do with you being Brazilian. I think it has to do with them being Minnesotans. I think here's the problem. How uptight is the room when a guy just says "see you down the road"? That's some sort of somebody actually pulls you aside and says you shouldn't say that? Say whatever you want. It's like, see you down the road. It's a harmless expression. So, yeah, I don't get it. I really don't get it. You didn't do anything wrong. And I think everybody listening to me agrees, But I'm sorry that you picked the phrase up from me and made a difficult situation for yourself. But it's not your fault. So, Eva McGill again, triple spin. Batcave trophies. About the Batcave trophies, Dinosaur Giant Penny, was there a Denny O'Neill's Bat Bible rule for those trophies? Have you or Doug or Alan added or tried to add any trophy to the Batcave during your run? Was this another thing you three guys were very aligned about? Like, where is the kitchen room in the Wayne Manor? Yeah, I think we all understood that, certain props needed to be there. The big Joker card, the dinosaur, the penny. I like showing Batman's basically wardrobe room with all the different Bat costumes in it. And I think we added the Robin costumes in the glass cases, Dick Grayson's costume and Jason Todd's costume. If I remember right, we had an empty display case for one day Tim Drake's costume would go in there. So Denny had no directives about that. Just like all of us knowing where the kitchen was in Wayne Manor, I think Denny understood that we understood, what the cave was about. I don't think we consciously made any additions to the story. I remember I wrote a thing called The Chalice with John Van Fleet, who came up with the plot line, and I added a vault room where Batman keeps his piece of kryptonite. In case Superman were ever to go to Berserk or any Kryptonians with bad intentions were ever to show up, Batman could defeat them because the man plans ahead. But there were no directives on the Batcave other than Graham Nolan. They commissioned Graham Nolan to do drawings of the Batcave. So we had, diagrams. So we, mostly for the artists, so the artists could be consistent in the look of the cave. And it was cool because with Graham doing that, we were allowed to rethink it and think about a lot of stuff. Where would I came up with the idea that there would be a computer cold room underneath the main floor, where we see Batman and Robin, sitting at their computer console, or where the Batmobile is, as you see in this picture. Underneath that was a cold room, and it was cooled with water from subterranean streams, would be run through pipes to keep it. And I think I said that he had 3 Cray computers, which at the time were top of the line mainframe computers, the most powerful computers you could get. Of course, your cell phone probably does more than they did now, but things like that. We got to think about things like that. And because it was Graham doing it, he designed the corridor, the staircase that leads down to the subway platform where the subway rocket was, and things like that. So the Batcave obviously changes over time, evolves, and the rest of it. But largely we were left on our own. And in fact, in addition to doing the Batcave drawings, Graham did a number of short stories about the trophies, the various trophies, and wrote. He either rewrote the stories of how the trophies originally got there, just retelling them, or came up with new ones. I can't remember, but they were really cool stories because Graham is just such a Batman scholar. He was the perfect guy to work on it, and they were I think 8-page stories explaining the trophies. And he did it. I don't know how many of them he did. He didn't do enough for a whole trade. And I think in his mind that's what he wanted to do, was a whole trade worth of these things. But cool stuff. They were great days working on that stuff. Ramsire 7. Hey Chuck, you recently talked about the science fiction authors you've read, including some of the hard science fiction writers such as Paul and Clark. I've heard you mention Robert Heinlein a few times, but I don't think I've ever heard your opinions of him or his books. Have you read much of Heinlein? Are you a fan? What do you think of his future history stories and his characters such as Lazarus Long? I read a lot of early Heinlein, when it was Green Hills of Earth. and the roads must roll, and obviously Starship Troopers and a bunch of stuff like that. I really didn't read his later stuff when he kind of became like a sort of a science fiction philosopher king, and he was writing like Jonathan Swift type science fiction stories. I didn't really get into all that stuff, but I dug what I read. I always remember the story because he would write a lot about like blue collar guys in space, truck drivers in space and things like that. And I remember a story where a ship gets holed by a small meteor, and they're going to lose all their atmosphere. And one of the guys on the spaceship volunteers to put his butt up against the hole and keep the atmosphere from leaking out. That one always stuck with me because that's I found that funny. Of course, I was like 13 when I was reading it, but yeah, I read a lot of his early stuff, and I like his stuff, and he was kind of a controversial figure because of his right-wing politics, but I never had a problem with that, oddly. So yeah, read a whole bunch of early Heinlein. Never read like Stranger in a Strange Land, or I can't even remember all the rest of them. There you go. Adam Steckel. With the new Superman movie releasing, I've seen some debate about true Superman fans. What would you consider essential reading or viewing for a true Superman fan, besides, of course, Superman the Odyssey? Yeah, I mean, wow. There's a lot of Superman to read. There's a lot of errors. Not errors. Well, there's some errors, but eras of the character. And I remember when John Byrne basically rebooted the franchise, I liked it. I liked what he was doing. He was simplifying things because the Superman universe had become so dense. And like a lot of fans at the time, I'm like, yeah, we're going to trim the fat off of the universe. And, John Byrne leads the way. And I was kind of for it, but after a while, I realized it kind of lost the charm for me. The charm of the Superman stories were that they were so crowded with continuity and imponderables and, problem solving and just questions about Superman, and Byrne answered way too many of those questions and kind of took it all away. And I really became disenchanted when he did a story in which Big Barda gets raped, and I'm like, okay, I'm out. And that was the last thing I read of Byrne's run. For me, the best thing when I was actively reading superhero comics as an adolescent was Denny O'Neil's contributions. Not only Superman versus Muhammad Ali, but his sadly brief run on the Superman title, which I really liked. And I've explained this in an earlier video about Denny's run on Superman, and because I got to know the backstory of it. Because I would ask Denny questions about that run a lot. And he shared a lot of information about what he was thinking and why he kind of lost interest in it, and which was obvious in the stories. But boy, it started off so cool. And he asked his own questions about Superman that no one had asked before, and attempted to answer them in the stories. So if you ever get a hold of Denny O'Neil's run, it's been collected a couple of times. I think it's called Kryptonite No More, the collection. And it's really worth checking out because it's a true Superman story. He didn't want to write Superman, but he was respectful enough, and then he was like going to put the Denny O'Neil stamp on Superman, but it's a subtle Denny O'Neil stamp. I mean, we write what we write. We can't escape who we are when we write, and Denny couldn't escape when he was writing Superman. And it's interesting. It's an interesting run. But for me, my favorite are the classic stories from late 50s into like 64, 65. I love these stories because they're crazy. They're zany. They come up with bizarre concepts. The guys working on Superman at the time, the editors and the writers, they were really fighting the idea that every Superman story has been told. So they were really reaching, really trying, and they were doing the imponderables, which fascinated me when I was a kid. I remember a story where Clark and Lois have to pretend to be house servants working for the Daily Planet, and they're investigating this rich guy. And so Clark and Lois get jobs as a butler and a maid. And I remember, Clark has to, he's given the silverware to polish, but he wants to do some investigating. So he quickly uses his super breath and super speed to polish all the silverware in like 3 seconds to buy himself some time to investigate. And things like that when I was a kid, I was like, oh, that's so cool. And, answering questions like, how does he cut his hair? How does he shave? Where did the costume come from? Why doesn't it get ripped? All these different questions that I had, and that the comic would ask and then answer. And then they would come up with the most insane concepts. Jimmy Olsen turns into a gorilla, and it's like, well, what the hell? And the thing about those Superman stories is you had to read them to the end. You had to find out, well, what's going to happen now that, Lois has a twin sister she never heard of before. They just come with these zany concepts, probably over 3 martini lunches. But they would, and sometimes the resolutions were, contrived and stupid and everything else. But that doesn't take away from the fact you had to read the whole story. And I reread a lot of these as an adult, and they had the same effect on me as an adult they had on me as a kid. They're like salted peanuts. It's like I can't stop reading these stories, even though they're silly. but there's a craft here. There's an elegance to this silliness. They're grandly silly, and that's why this is my favorite run. Just unbridled imagination. It's like, who gives a damn? Let's just throw it against the wall. The kids will love it because they're stupid. But some of the stories like Otto Binder and Edmund Hamilton, you can see where they were like, I don't think the kids are that stupid, and they would really put an effort in. There's a guy that was writing in that period, I can't remember his name, but I don't care for his stuff at all, because he was just pulling this stuff out of thin air with no real resolutions. I should find the name and tell you next time. But he wrote a bunch of World's Finest in the late 50s that like really fall flat. But this, I'm off on a tangent, but hey, it's my show. You can ask for your money back. So anyway, that's my favorite era. And of course, then we come to what's called the Triangle era, and I read them. You got led by Mike Carlin, you had Roger Stern, Dan Jurgens, Jerry Ordway, Butch Guice, Ron Frenz. I mean, the list goes on and on of really talented guys who really just, for a decade almost, guided Superman to, greater popularity than he had in decades. Which, that's heavy lifting. That's heavy lifting on a character that's been around this long, that's this iconic, and they obviously loved the character. They obviously respected the character, and they did a lot. They did a lot of what Mike Carlin calls the illusion of change to keep you interested and excited. And it's a hell of a run. The Triangle run is a hell of a run. Now, you mentioned the movie, and I know I'm going to get the inevitable question, Chuck, what did you think of the movie? I have not seen the movie. Chances are I will never see this movie. I know this will shock you, but I've only ever seen one Superman movie. I saw the first Christopher Reeve movie. I didn't even go to the movies to see it. I saw it on HBO one time, and I don't like any of the Superman movies. To be fair, I don't like any of the Batman movies either. But the Batman movies I've watched for the most part, but I would never rewatch them. So I hate to disappoint you. So I haven't seen this one, and quite frankly, I probably won't. So there you go. Hey, I've got these exclusive postcards. You can only get them one way, and I'll send you 5 of these postcards. And all you got to do is join me at Subscribestar. Subscribestar, Chuck Dixon. The link will be below this video. And if you become a $5 member, you will get these 5 signed postcards just for you. In addition to that, when you first join Subscribestar, you'll get a big old package of stuff signed by me. In addition to the postcards, you will get signed comics and other, tchotchkes and goodies that are worth a whole lot more than your $5. I will promise you that. And as each month comes, you will get digital goodies, unpublished scripts, or scripts for unpublished comics, sometimes in a PDF file with an entire unpublished comic book in it with the script. For example, a few months ago, I gave SubscribeStar members my treatment for Expendables 2. I've given over a story called Birds of Prey 1943, the full artwork and the script for an unpublished issue of Birds of Prey. Stuff like that. And in the past, members have received signed, comics. The first Something Big was given free to members. So throughout the year you'll get stuff. Now you'll say, Chuck, what do you need $5 from me for? This is the money that I use. It's the Chuck Dixon slush fund for creating things like My Sister Suprema, Something Big, the upcoming Buttermilk, and Sword of Wood. This is how I pay my artists. I don't pay myself out of this fund because, frankly, there's no money left over after I paid the artists. But this allows me total creative freedom. Instead of crowdfunding these projects, I reach out to subscribers. And I don't have a lot of subscribers, but you guys have managed to, because my artists have other assignments and can't dedicate themselves fully to each of my projects, and the projects take years to produce, so far you guys have kept up. So you subscribers, any of you subscribers listening, you have funded any number of comic projects. And but anyway, join it. I'm trying to build a community over there for you to communicate. Also on the SubscribeStar website, you hear first about anything that's going on. With SubscribeStar subscribers were the first to hear all the news about a working man. And they're the first to see artwork from upcoming projects and things like that. So you might want to check it out. I would certainly appreciate it if you would. Again, if you want to get a hold of me, BrunoBookstore@gmail.com. BrunoBookstore@gmail.com is the most reliable way to reach me with your awesome questions. Fantastic questions this week. I promise the spins will be back when I appear again. And I apologize for the lateness. I hope it'll never happen again. And I want to thank all of you for liking, subscribing, spreading the word, watching, listening, whatever you do. And don't worry about it, my Brazilian friend. I'll see you down the road.